Thank you for that introduction. Let me at the outset thank Mody University for having me for this 2-day very interesting and very important program. At the outset, let me also thank the chairman and the trustees, the director, the dean of the School of Liberal Arts, the faculty members, and my dear students. I'm also very happy that this program is being coordinated by Dr. Kamini, who is a teacher here, but was a former student at Central University of Gujara. So it's a very, very proud moment for me to speak on the request and the invite of one of our former students. So thank you, all of you, and my dear students. Now, before I start to speak on the role of youth, and we are talking about the role of youth in the context of the larger G20 platform. Why are we debating this whole issue of the role of youth? I think this is a very important and a pertinent question which, as students, you need to understand. But before that, it's also a very proud moment that India is hosting the presidency of G20. I mean, one can very simply say that it's a foreign affairs issue. Presidencies go by rotation. But let me take you back to December 1st, when India assumed the presidency of the G20 forum. And prior to India, I think it was Indonesia. While taking this presidency, Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji called it, and I quote within quotes, it's a huge opportunity for India. He further says that India must utilize this opportunity of G20 leadership by focusing on global good and welfare, be it peace or unity, sensitivity towards environment, or sustainable development. India has solutions to the challenges related to all such things. And he also said during his radio show, which is a very popular show, Man Ki Baat, it's primarily from there that I'm quoting Prime Minister Modi. Now, let me slightly dissect this statement of Honorable Prime Minister. What does he mean when he say it's G20, it's India's role, a very important global role which India is going to play? What does it mean? And obviously the commentators subsequently said it's primarily India's G20 moment. I think this is one very important question which, as young students, you need to understand. Why is India important? This is a question, and I think in the last 5-6 years, you must have seen that when Prime Minister visits, whether be it United States or France or Britain or Australia, I think there is a huge welcome which goes. I think it's not just the welcome of Prime Minister. It's the welcome of the citizens of India, the youth of India, which means that the world is looking towards India to look for solutions for which they have no answers. Whether be it the issue of climate change, whether be it the issue of sustainability, whether be it the issue of energy transitions, I think the world today is looking towards India as to how India possibly can offer and what solutions can India offer to the rest of the world. The second aspect, which as students you also need to understand, as to what is the backdrop of G20, which we are hosting. Two very significant events have happened globally. The first was the COVID challenge. Please understand. Global health is a serious issue. It is not just an issue which is something which we cannot discuss today. Global health is going to be securitized. And why I say global health is going to be securitized? Because till date we do not know as to what was basically the origin of the virus. Whether the virus came from an animal market, from Wuhan district, whether it came from one of the laboratories, from Wuhan Institute of Technology, no one knows. And more importantly, we also need to question the role of the international organizations like the World Health Organization, which despite the fact that there was a pandemic which was brewing in China, it took roughly 1.5 months to declare COVID as a pandemic. Why did this happen? Because China was able to manipulate the presidency of the World Health Organization. So global institutions, therefore, are important today. And within this, I think there is a global power shift which is happening. This power shift, which I am talking about, and students of international relations and politics understand, that if I take you back to the Industrial Revolution, I think that's where Europe became important. We were all colonized. The wealth went from this part, and it actually contributed to the development of Europe. 1945, the emergence of nuclear technology, the nuclear weapons, actually brought US into prominence. 1945 onwards, in fact, we talk of multilateral international institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions, which were actually shaping the global economy. But now, after 1989, the end of the Cold War, the collapse of Soviet Union, the rise of China, I think there is a power shift which is happening towards Asia. This is something which, as students, you need to understand. And when we talk of Asia as the center of power, there are three primarily important countries which are going to define as to how the world would look like. One is China. The second is Japan. And the third, the most important country, is India. Now let's start with China. It's a totalitarian regime. I gave you the example of COVID. It's a closed economy. It wants to rule the world on its own terms. It wants to change international institutions, global governance, which would possibly tune China's primacy into the world. But at the same time, please also don't forget that China is a country which actually wants to not just compete, but also suppress you. China is the only country which actually spends most of its economic development into military. It is an irredentist power. I am using the terms very carefully. It has territorial disputes. I am not using boundary disputes. These are territorial disputes with virtually all its neighbors, whether be it in South China Sea, whether be it with Myanmar, whether be it with Bhutan, with India. So it has territorial disputes. And more importantly, please understand, it's one country which does not hesitate to use force to settle its dispute. Diplomacy is not the answer in the Chinese scheme of thinking. There are challenges too in China. The first major challenge, which I would say, is the aging population. They went ahead with one-child policy. Today, I mean, they are facing the consequences of it. I mean, though there were not very easy solutions to the demographic growth which was happening. The second important country is again Japan. With great economy, but Japan again is facing a major challenge of aging population. One of the reasons why many of these countries, right from Japan to India, are coming together as part of what you say the Indo-Pacific construct to build in capacities against a irredentist power like China is precisely for this reason. Now let's come to India. The only country which has believed in the idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the only country which has never ever attacked historically in the first place. I can take you back into history. Battle of Hidispus, 326 BC. We were a defensive power. The Battle of Panipat, we actually held ourselves. We were never to attack the. I mean, it's a debatable question. Again, how the Brits came, how they ruled us, and even today, despite the fact that we are now a state with a nuclear weapon, look at a nuclear philosophy. We believe in no first strike. We believe in non-use of nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear adversary. Right? These are important. Let me draw a contrast with other countries. I mean, many of you who may have traveled abroad, go to Australia, Canberra. There is a war memorial. Australia is one country which has never ever been attacked historically, but the only country which has fought virtually all wars. So when I speak of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, I am speaking from our traditions, from a philosophy, from a civilization which virtually believes in the idea of live and let live. The best example was the COVID crisis. Look at the response of two countries. On the one hand, you have had United States, which kept pressurizing you for certain tablets which were actually required. We produced the vaccine, we shared the vaccines virtually free of cost. That's the Indian idea. The third thing why India is going to be important is, now I am coming to the point where you are important. The youth. Because in the coming decades, India is going to have the largest youth population, 18 to 35. And since I'm speaking in Mody University, I think the girl power is going to be equally important. And I say so with lot of conviction because girl is the center of family, she is the center of society, she is the center of state and nation. So, if a transformation has to happen, it has to happen from you. So, this is something which you have to understand. Your role is going to be very, very important. And India is the only country which believes in institutions, whether be it the institution of family, whether be it the institution of marriage. I gave you the example of how demographies are changing. But please understand, the Western societies which did not believe in the idea of institution of family and marriage are also facing the similar problem. So there is lot of opportunity for India, the Indian youth, to contribute not just to the growth and development of your nation, but to develop the world. Look at the Indian diaspora. We have been able to translate our population into a sort of what we say demographic dividend. Indian diaspora in United States is the most respected diaspora. It has contributed not just to the development of US, but it has also been able to cement a better ties between India, which is basically the motherland, but also the country which is the host country. The Indo-US nuclear deal is the best and the standing example. And you see today that India and Indians are virtually everywhere in leadership roles across the globe. So this is what the power of India, the power of youth is. And this is what I take you back from where I started. This is what Prime Minister Modi was hinting in his Man Ki Baat program. This is the strength, and this is basically G20 is India's moment. We need to interact. We need to tell our people. We also need to sensitize our population to the challenges which are likely to come. So it's a huge responsibility on all of us. The second issue which Prime Minister, and he needs to get credit for this, we generally say it's a foreign policy issue, let MEA Raisina Hills debate and discuss, negotiate. But see, he has also made it a popular movement. Why? It is also related to climate change, sustainability, energy transitions, and more so with your lifestyle. In fact, the director in the morning spoke that you've had a program on, say, I think millets. Why is millet important? Because one of the challenges which our youth is, and India and Indians are likely to face, is basically the health issue. India is going to be one of the largest lifestyle diabetes. Diabetes is actually a lifestyle disease. Wheat, which was not green, needs to be replaced. Because if we need to address, we need to protect our population, our youth, from many of these consequences, I think there has to be a change in the lifestyle. I'm very happy to see your campus because there's a lot of discipline out here. I mean, morning you get up, you go, there is a very defined breakfast, there is a lunch, right? I mean, I'm here just for a day, but actually it attracts. Because this brings in a discipline in our life. And this discipline is important because if as a nation we need to grow, I think this discipline for the youth is equally important. Now, there are a lot of issues, in fact, which I thought I'll highlight. Let me also share, I'm also part of the MEA University Connect program, and there is a very interesting booklet on G20 primer, which is available on the G20 website. I would suggest that all of you please read this book. But when we talk of strengths of India, there are other issues which I think are going to be important in our G20 presidency. One is the sense of oneness which we are telling through the whole idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future. I will not go into details. The second is, we are the mother of democracy. Don't forget. The students of political science are generally taught that democracy came from the Western world. No. It was not Plato, Aristotle. And it's precisely because we are being taught today that it was the Westphalian democracy. No. Actually, the Westphalian democracy is playing a major challenge when we imbibe those ideas and concepts. India has always been and remained a civilizational state, please understand. Our democracy, Raj, state, the concept, if translated, was Raj, Rajya ka concept. Right. And we also talk of Ram Raj. And Ram Raj is how an ideal state and a king should. So these were the values of a state and king, which we have never been taught in a modern political science. We teach Plato, Aristotle, but I think it's time that we need to revisit some of these concepts. So the mother of democracy is India, right? This is something which we need to. The third, the important issue is, by hosting G20, we are also being able to bring in all countries, the decolonized countries, which we primarily call the global south. We have had, say, South-South cooperation, South-South dialogue, but I think India today can be a good interlocutor between what we say the global south and the global north developed. One of the issues, which was the Paris Agreement on climate change, Prime Minister played a very important role. He was able to bridge this divide of north-south. And I think when I say G20 is India's moment, I think it's important for us to understand that India can play an important role as an interlocutor between what you can say the developed and the developing. Right. When it comes to G20 University Connect, and since I think we are addressing the youth because we have to make India world ready for the future. And when I say this, I think it's you, the next generation, which is going to address this issue. These are also, as I said, very challenging times. Climate change is going to be a very, very crucial, important issue. But how do we address transition to a clean technology is something which I think this G20 issue is, G20 should look into. This is one of the very, very important. And since when we discuss climate, I think it's part of what we say, the global commons, right? I think India should also think in terms of how to finance to such clean technologies. I think this should also be one of the important topics of debate and discussion. The third thing which I think as terms of challenges are important is, and this is also a strength in software, artificial intelligence. Technology is now driving. It's going to change the world. There will be no Westphalian state when it comes to technology. It transcends the boundaries. And I think this is going to be the core strength of India and our youth. Right, so technology becomes a very, very important role. So, and along with technologies, I would emphasize the role of artificial intelligence. When it comes to economics, I think global supply chains are very, very important. Post-COVID, there has been a major disruption in global supply chain. And I think as the economy recovers, we would be able to, but it also makes us important that we focus on our own manufacturing, whether be it say in form of SMMCs or other say small industries within. Startups, which Prime Minister is emphasizing, primarily would address some of these issues. Not only that, it contributes to the growth of our economy, but it also links up with the global economy as such. And as I said, health and food issues are going to be very, very important. Look at our neighborhood, the western neighbor. I don't know if you guys are following the news. They are in distress. Look at the prices of onions or tomatoes. Food is going to be a very, very important issue, challenges, possibly which should impinge international relations as well. And so is health. I think many of these issues are very, very challenging for us. And when I talk in universities, I always keep saying that the youth of this country should be sensitized to look into many of these challenges, because you are the future. I would also compliment the government and the ministry that we have now a national education policy in place. And many of the universities are now migrating to this national education policy. I was told by your director that many of these key elements of the NEP have been implemented by Mody University. I think universities have a role to play. You have to bring in interdisciplinarity in your education. There has to be some innovative thinking, right? I mean, gone are the days where you think of just medical science or engineering. I think sky is the limit, and I would urge the youth that I think you should be imaginative, do what you like, do it scientifically, and I think you are the future of not just India, but the world. So I'll stop here. I'll be very happy to take questions. Thank you. Do we have a QA session?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, my question is to you is that do you think India needs a young leader or young mind to run the country?
When we talk of youth, right, one has to be young in his ideas, right? That's the first principle of how we define youth, right? You should innovate ideas. When I say innovation, it also means you also unlearn some of the things which possibly have been some impediments in. So I don't link it to larger politics. Politics is something entirely different. I always believe that politics is about bringing people together, right? It's a very difficult task to bring 20 people in one single room. But I think our leaders have the capacity, the communication to engage with the rest of the community. I think that's the role of leaders, right? Rest is what the professionals do. I mean, there's a whole, when we talk in terms of a state, there is a whole bureaucracy which works. There are intellectuals, youth leaders like you. Society has an important role to play. You have NGOs and a lot of other key elements which contribute to, in a society and a political system like ours, which is embedded in democratic ethos. So I think let the system work. This is one of the most democratic and workable system. But when it comes to ideas, right? You have the freedom to innovate and engage with your ideas, right?
Thank you, sir.
Namaskar, sir. Sir, as youth mind and youth population can be seen more brave, more courageous, but the problem of unemployment is hindering their capabilities, or they are bringing their self-confidence down. So what is your perspective about it?
Unemployment, I think it's a serious issue, right? But see, I put it this way. When we are looking for employment, we are looking generally for employment which the state provides, right? This is a common notion कि इतनी vacancies public service commission निकालेगा, इतने state public service commissions निकालेंगे, right? So when we are talking of unemployment, we are actually addressing to those very limited set of vacancies which actually rest with the state. I think the role of education is something much more wider, right? Look at some developed countries. Nobody goes to work in government. Let me very frankly share this with you. They go for startups, right? They go in universities. They want to have their own systems. I think the idea of a state should be able to build in capacities where each and every individual develops capacities, skills, right, and can go even for self-employment. See, in a country like ours, right, the state cannot provide employment to each and every person. So we will have to understand this. But yes, the role of a state is certainly to create capacities wherein a lot of employments are created, whether it's a self-employment or whatever, but build in capacities wherein people can look for their livelihoods, right?
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, as you told us that technology is going to play a crucial role in the coming years. But if I'm looking at the global perspective, still man companies like Meta, Alphabet, Netflix or Amazon, they are controlling the technology of whole the world. But in India still, but till date, we don't have that kind of technological leaders. So my question is, what is the major restriction in this context?
And I think there are many leaders now who are coming into this field, right? I mean, I just don't want to name any particular company, but there is one critique that when we are on Facebook, when we are on Twitter, I think their servers are all hosted in California. I think this idea is changing. There are many Indian industrialists who are thinking in terms of now having their own technology device, their own servers, their own, say, systems wherein they can control the information. Information warfare is another very important domain, right? Who controls the information is also part of the larger politics. So there is a lot of thinking now going amongst the industrialists also, and in the state, within the capacities of a state, that this is one realm. If I have to slightly extend it, why was that there was more emphasis given on rupee, right? Because it's not just one segment wherein, but other segments like when it comes to finance, right? I think if you have your own institutions, if you have your own cards, I think that would possibly strengthen your own economy rather than going for Citibank or any other system. So I think there is some thinking. It may take some time, but I think we are going in the right direction. I can only say that. I think there are some students waiting here for quite some time.
Good afternoon, sir. So, what is your opinion on the future existence of the G20? Because I come from I'm asking like this? Because in the last couple of months, we have seen G20 hasn't given a joint statement on one of the most conflict, Ukraine. So will this fail to give the joint statement? Will it impact the future existence of the G20? Or because like Ukraine war is almost 14 months now, but from G20, because of the Ukraine war, two fundamental which G20 provides, that is peace and the trade, is both affected by the Russia-Ukraine war. So will this questions in the existence later on in the G20? So what's your
Yes,
opinion on
I think it's a very interesting question, and generally when we talk in terms of big conferences, we always look at it purely from the terms whether agreement has happened or not, whether a statement has come. I don't expect that there would be a joint statement. Let me be very honest with you, right? Not just G20, I can give you another examples. When it comes to United Nations, like there is a conference on disarmament which routinely happens at the UN office at Geneva, right? Most of the decisions in these conferences are taken by consensus, right? We don't use the term veto, but yes, if there is one country which does not agree to any of the idea, obviously the consensus is not built. So it's putting differently, but it's like a veto, right? So most multilateral conferences have this. If you look at the composition of G20, I think China is one of the important member of G20, which looks at many of these countries, many of these issues rather differently. As I said, it's a forum of global south, but there are countries. So the geopolitical contestation also will reflect when it comes to the summit meetings which are held. It happens. If you remember, Prime Minister Mody in Indonesia made it a point that he meets Chinese premier, precisely because he wanted to have a sort of a consensus on many of these issues. When it comes to Russia-Ukraine war, right, and the world is divided there, Indian position is absolutely clear. Normatively, if we think, we are against any form of violence. When it comes to immediate national interest, yes, we have every right to buy oil from Russia, because Russia has offered us the cheapest oil. It actually contributes to our economy. So please understand, there are certain normative objectives of your foreign policy which continue to remain the same. We stand for Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we stand for a peaceful world, we aspire for that. But there are national security considerations as well, right? In Russia-Ukraine war, if you ask me which country is going to benefit the most, I think it's China, right? China is not just watching this war, but I think China also wants to replace Russia, right? It wants to, as I said, it wants to play a global role. And if we slightly sideline the Western world, I think China is very carefully watching this world. And I think Chinese will have their own position which are driven by their national interest on the issue of Russia-Ukraine war. Possibly some of may reflect in the G20 summit. But I am sure when it comes to climate change, sustainability, China will be on board with us. We have seen this in the past climate negotiations also. So this may, but yes, there could be a possibility that the consensus may not come. But as I said, the fact that we are debating, we are discussing these issues, right? I think this sensitization to the rest of the world is important. Brazil is going to be the next host of G20. So if you see Indonesia followed by India and Brazil, I think these are all three countries which come from global south, which means all these three countries, they can take the millennium goals which have been laid down by United Nations for, I think, the rest couple of years. So this is important for me.
Sir, I want to ask you a question. I am here.
Oh, yeah, please.
Sir, in our all talks, be it in conference, seminars and workshop and even classrooms also, we always encourage and inspire the youth to come in the forefront. We want to hand over this power legacy to the youth. But the moment the youth comes in the society, comes in the market, makes a pedal yatra from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, claiming and inspiring and telling the whole world that we are energetic, I am energetic. But why that youth is not accepted in our country? I am unaming a person.
No, I think that's not a fair assessment about our youth. I'm very optimistic about my youth. Let me tell you. See, when I use this term, that India is aspirational, right? It's a term which we always hear, our political leaders also keep. What is this aspirational India? It's also about the aspiration of a youth. Let me take myself back to my grandparents or my parents. Look at how they lived. सरकारी नौकरी है, बाद में पेंशन मिल गई, right? पेंशन के बाद छोटा सा एक घर बना लिया, बच्चों को पढ़ा दिया. That's what life was, right? Now contrast this with the youth of today. The youth of today is far smarter than what my parents or my grandparents. My young daughter, who is in just class 6th, is far smarter using this mobile phone, right? She knows all the apps or whatever. So I have to learn from her. The second thing which we always please remember about, the youth of today wants all good things for himself or herself at an early age. They want a swanky car. You do a survey, everyone would want to have the best swanky car. They want to have a very decent flat at the beginning of their career. There is no harm in that. But at the same time, they are honest taxpayers. Please understand. This is what, and I see this as the future. The youth, the software industry, which was primarily the youth, was moved from India to many other places across. I mean, the way their lifestyles have changed, and they are honest taxpayers. I don't see any harm. They also believe in the Indian values. Look at the youth who is sitting, say, abroad, heading some of the, 45, 46. So I think the youth of today is aspirational, but he's honest. And precisely for this reason, I always keep saying that when we discuss about India and the future of India, I think you need to factor this very aspirational youth population in that. This is my assessment, but as I said, assessments may vary. But I'm very happy about the Indian youth of today. I think there are some questions from this.
Jai Hind, sir. My name is Aparna Tyagi. My question is, how can we stop China from being a world hegemon, and what role can India play in this?
A very interesting question in the sense, because China is not just a global concern, but it's also an Indian concern, right? Why I say this, because those who are students of politics know about the Chinese grand design of what they call the Belt and Road, right? Wherein you need to connect right from the important 6 corridors connecting from Eurasia to Africa to Gwadar port in Pakistan, and then connecting all the ports within South Asia, primarily because the idea is to countervail the rising influence in the Asian context, right? So that's there, right? Please also understand, Chinese, and if you look into Chinese history and civilization, there has been an old Chinese thinking whether China wants to be a maritime power or a continental power, right? Most of the time, Chinese thought possibly they could be a good maritime power, and therefore the focus of development was more towards the Chinese East, right? That was basically the focus. Now they have started moving towards the western side. The Indian answer to this, because I have got this chit, so I'll slightly try to shorten. The Indian answer is to have an alternative framework built in the Indo-Pacific capacities, wherein many parts like US, Australia, Japan, and many other are likely to engage, build in capacities. Building capacities not necessarily means that you engage in a sort of a warfare, right? But we need to prepare ourselves to build in capacities. I think that's India's answer to the Chinese growing military might in this particular region, right?
Thank you, sir.
I can
Sir?
take some questions if there are. So,
Yes, sir, there is.
outside?
लास्ट क्वेश्चन सर,
Okay.
इफ यू डोंट माइंड सर, अभी आपने बोला था कि इंडिया इज़ मदर ऑफ ऑल डेमोक्रेसीज, और आपने एग्जांपल दिया था राम राज्य का। तो सर, ये हमारी दो हिस्टोरिकल बुक सबसे बड़ी रामायण और महाभारत, सर इसमें हमें डेमोक्रेसी कहाँ दिखी? जैसे कि प्रजा चाहती थी कि राम जी राजा बने, पर भरत को बनाया गया। अगर भरत नहीं चाहता तो राम जी कभी नहीं बनते। और फिर कौरव और पांडवों में भी सेम हुआ, प्रजा चाहती थी कि पांडव बने पर कौरव बने।
See, it's a very important debate, right?
Yes.
Ram ko Bhagwan nahi mana, he is Purushottam,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Which means he is a son, he is a father, he is a husband, right? And he is also a king. So he needs to balance all these values. वो अलग अलग जगह पे अलग अलग, but I think it's a very long debate. We can discuss Ram Raj outside.
And last
हाँ, बताओ जल्दी।
सर, जैसे आपने क्लाइमेट चेंज के बारे में बोलता, तो आपको नहीं लगता कि आज की दिक्कत ही यही है कि हम क्लाइमेट चेंज को टेक्नोलॉजी से ओवरकम करना चाहते हैं? जैसे सबसे पहले ऑल अराउंड द वर्ल्ड घोड़ा गाड़ी चलती थी, फिर उस हॉर्सेस के मैन्योर बहुत ज़्यादा होता था, तो इस वजह से हमारी पेट्रोलियम कार्स आई थी, और अब पोल्यूशन की वजह से इलेक्ट्रिक कार्स आ रही है, और उसमें जो बैटरीज यूज़ होती है उसमें मिनरल्स बहुत ज़्यादा एग्जॉस्ट होते हैं, तो उससे भी हमारे इन्वायरमेंट को ऐसा कुछ बहुत अच्छा नहीं मिल रहा है। तो हम कैसे ओवरकम करें?
इसीलिए तो सोशल साइंस बड़ी कॉम्प्लेक्स है, राइट? बिकॉज यू आर डीलिंग विद ह्यूमंस, राइट? साइंस में इट्स ऑलवेज इजी टू अंडरस्टैंड फिजिक्स बिकॉज देयर आर लॉज ऑफ ग्रेविटेशन। सोशल साइंस में थियरीज होती हैं, राइट? बिकॉज यू आर डीलिंग विद ह्यूमंस एंड इंडिविजुअल्स। सो यस, देयर विल बी चैलेंजेस, राइट? उसके फिर अगली जनरेशन डिबेट करेगी, बट दैट्स हाउ वी हैव इवॉल्व्ड एज अ सोसाइटी, राइट? थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सर।
So thank you.